Welcome to session 6. Today we are going to learn box model in this session. And what is box model? Let's take a look at this picture. We have seen various elements right now, and so far we talked about images today. We saw a paragraph. Most of the elements that we have will appear in a box. That means it will have full width of the available real estate. It will occupy the full width if width is not specified, and it will have its height. So it is like a rectangular area covered by or occupied by an element. Now in that rectangular area, there will be the content. So like in p tag, we had the textual content, and that will appear here. Then we realize that when we put the border, we realize that border is getting too close to the content. And when we had a rounded corners in the border, it looked like the content is getting clipped. We have seen that in images also, where we saw that the image was getting clipped when we had borders too close to the content. I mean, that situation and this situation, we can add an extra space between the real content and the border. And that space is another rectangular area around the content, and that is called padding. Then you have the border. And border, you have already observed, will have its own width. You can specify width for the border. So that is the green area surrounding the padding. If you have specified the padding, that will be the space between content and border. If you have not specified the padding, border will be next to the content. Fine. Now after border, if you have another element, then the next element will get placed immediately. So the next element and the current element will start sharing the border. They will be conjoined. They will have the same line. The borders will kind of touch each other. They will not overlap, but they will touch. But if you want to have space between the borders of two elements, then you can put margin. So you want to say, okay, I'm an element and I have content, and I want to have my content separated from my border. So I put padding, and then I have a little thick border, and then around the border also I want to occupy some space so that my borders are fully visible and it does not get attached or placed together with other elements, right? So for that I put a margin. And after margin, there will be something more that is possible, which is called outline. But that is not part of the box model officially. We can use outline little later. Okay, so this is about how you want to place or make your content visible in a HTML page. Remember, this is for those elements which supports the dimensional attributes and which occupies a, or which is placed as a block, as a box. Okay. So we will see which are the elements, many elements that we have seen so far, like all headers, p tag, image tag are going to get you the box model. And technically, each element can be considered like a box. We will use this concept of box quite a lot so that our content is placed nicely, it is visible, it has proper spacing and proper margins, proper bordering, right? We will use this quite often in our HTML page creation so that the visualization of content is still good. And we have to also maintain a balance. We should not be using too much of space or too thick a border when the content is small. We have to have a balance always. And that is where the design thing comes again. Okay, so let's think about few things. How we will set up borders, how will we specifying padding, then margins and the dimensions. And finally, we'll talk about outline in this session. Use of border and use of padding you have already seen in the previous session. Okay, and if you did not understand, you can always watch the video again and understand how borders made a difference in case of images in our examples and in case of paragraphs. In case of paragraphs, we saw when we put some special bordering styles, the content was getting overlapped with the border, and then padding helped us create space around the content so that the border is always put a little away from the content's actual border, right? Now in this session, we'll look into these and anything that we have not learned so far, like margin and outline, to be specific. Okay, so there are various HTML tags with box model, as I said, and I have been showing you all headings, then p tag. One most commonly used layout element in HTML is div tag. Div stands for division or section. So you can have a section of the page created which is like a container or a tag which holds a lot of content. So div will generally not have any visualization of its own. It will not place anything. It's like a container, like a P. So P tag is usually to contain the text. Div tag is useful to put any kind of thing. So in P tag, it is not just text. You can put basically everything. So P and div are behavior wise similar, and P is also doing what? It is putting a next line. Div is also putting a next line. So it occupies a rectangular space, but div is more commonly used in practice. So you will see a whole lot of div tags in HTML pages that you will see. I told you yesterday to get into any portal's source code and see if you are able to recognize the content there. And if you'll go there, you will see a whole lot of divs present. Okay, so div is this very popular, common HTML tag that is used to create sections in the page, and then rest of the content will be put up inside the div. Now, on the properties that you see here, I think you are familiar with everything but margin. You have seen width earlier, which specifies the width of the element. Border. Can you interpret what is the meaning of the border value here? It's a shorthand for border. First one is specifying the thickness, 15 pixel thick border. Style is solid, and color of the border is green. So all three things of thickness, style, and color has been put together in one single property called border. Padding, 50 pixel. That means the content of the div will be placed, and then there will be space of 50 pixel created before the border will be put up, right? And then you have the margin, and that's the new thing. So when you put a margin, again, it's a dimension attribute where you will be putting dimensions in absolute values or relative values. And what it does, it actually creates a space beyond the border. So when you have your element created and you have the border created, then the next element will be placed after the margin, right? And each of these properties, like you can imagine, will have 4 possible values. Border for top, right, bottom, left. Padding for top, right, bottom, left. Margin for top, right, bottom, and left. So you can specify different values, but if you are specifying just one value, the same is applied all around. Okay. So if I have put up this and I have a page where I have put up a div with a content which says I am a box, and then on that I have applied these styles like width 300 pixel, border 15 px solid green, padding 50 pixel, and margin 20 pixel. And then I have another div which is not inside a box like this, where it is just a div without any overriding box properties, no dimensions specified, no borders, no padding, no margin. What you can see here, so the difference that you see here, this is the actual content that was to be displayed, but because the padding is 50 pixel and then there is a border, you see 50 pixel space this side, this side, this side, and maybe this side also, which is not visible for you because the content is not that wide. But 50 pixel has been put up all around the content before the border is created. Next, the border is created with 15 pixel width, and it's a solid border with green color. And then a margin of 20 pixel has been put up all around this border. So 20 pixel this side, 20 pixel this side, and this side, and the bottom also. Right? And width of this is of course 300 pixel. So width of this is calculated from this border to this border, edge of this border, right? So so 300 pixel is actually this content's width. All right. So we'll get into the calculations little later. What exactly is 300 pixel? Well, is padding added to 300 pixel, or this is within the border? Or border width of 15 pixel, is that part of 300 pixel? I mean, both sides, 15 plus 15, padding 50 plus 50, and then margin 20 plus 20. Are those all included in the 300 pixel, or those are beyond 300 pixel? We'll see that actual interpretation and calculation little later. But for the time being, let's understand the impact of these values. Okay, the second one, as I said, is a regular div without any special styling, and here the default values will get applied. So width is 100%, border is 0, padding is 0, margin is 0. So what you see here is it is very close to the left side of the screen, and it is almost next to the previous elements outer border. So border and then margin, and then the next one gets visible. I can see this example working. Let's go there and we will see it. Okay. So let me go to an example which I had created earlier, and I will copy it. In fact, let me comment out content from here and uncomment the old content, which is going to give me the same thing, an example 3.6. So I will go to the folder and browse that page 3.6. And here it is, right? So I'll close the other example, and here it is. Now let me put up a little border around this style. And here I'm saying border, and I'm saying 1 pixel solid red, right? So that a border is just put up. I'm not putting any margin, I'm not putting any padding around this, and let us see what happens now. You see, the content and the border is very close to each other because there is no padding. And here, and this one is separated from the earlier box because there was a margin. Now, if I remove that margin, you will see a difference. I remove the margin and refresh. Now you see what? This element's border and the earlier element's border are attached next to each other because there is no space between the elements. And this side also, it has got closer to this edge, and on the upper side also it has come closer to the edge. That is because the margin all around has been removed. I place it back and watch it carefully. The margin will come back all around. Yes. So this side margin came back, this side came back, and this side also it came back. On the right hand side, we have no element, so it is not making any difference for us, right? So this is how the box model helps place the content next to each other nicely, properly separated. Okay. So you will be using border margin, padding, and the dimensions of the elements for placing your content on screen along with the rest of the content, and it will give you a whole lot of good appearance. All right, so let's talk about the dimensions. You are already familiar, but I will just explain you once more. So width and height are the attributes. It is CSS attributes. So width and height are the attributes which you specify. And then the element will occupy that much of space. You can see here in this box, this div, I had specified 100 for width, 100 pixel, and for height, I had specified 200 pixel, and this is how it appears. By default, div will occupy 100% height, 100% width, and as much only height as required. Okay. So this is width and height, and it is a fixed value mostly, or it can have a relative value, but it is always going to be applied, right? So this is how I can specify, and it works. But there are situations where we may not have enough width available or enough height available that I want to. So in such cases, I can say max height and max width. So it's an indicative value for height and width. And I set a limit that, okay, I may have a requirement of this much width, but if not enough width is available, you can just accommodate into whatever width or whatever height that is available. So you set a limit. You set a limit on the upper side by saying max height or max width. And when your screen dimension changes, and how does that happen? Maybe your browser's size has been changed. You can do that, right? You can always do that. So let's see, I have this page and I can resize, right? But when I'm resizing, the box dimensions are not changing, right? Now, let me do one thing. Instead of setting width, if I say max width, and in max width, I specify 600, okay? And then you see what happens. It occupied this much, and I reduce, this will adjust. But when I go further, beyond 600, it will go up to 600, right? And if I don't have enough space, like 600 or so, it will come down. Now, if I don't specify max width, but I say width, then you will see something abnormal happening. What will happen? A scroll bar will appear because the actual width of the element is 600 and it is beyond the visible area. So you get a scroll bar to go through the content, right? So this is a drawback of fixed value width. And that is where we generally prefer the limits. So it makes the screen dimensions flexible and it can go up to certain limit. Similarly, the other side of this is min width. And if I say minimum width is 100 or maybe 300, so minimum width is 300 and this is how it is, and then I can go expanding and it can go to the full width, but minimum will be 300. So if I reduce the width again, width of screen is getting reduced, so 300 is the minimum that I can go with. So let me make it little more so that after this limit it will put up a scroll bar. Okay, so you see 500 is the minimum. So anything less than 500, the screen size, it is not reducing less than that. But if I go more, it will become larger. And anything less than 500 screen width, a scroll bar will appear. So min width, min height, or max width, max height is preferred choices for dimensions over a fixed width and height because of your adaptability, your screen's adaptability on different browser screens and the media screen. So your page is not only for computers, and computers will also have different size monitors. And similarly, the target is nowadays mobile phone users. So you will be using min or max appropriately to set the limits. Okay. All right. So that is on the dimension part. Then we have spaces around the content, and we have already learned about that. The options are padding and margin. And sometimes it gets confusing. What is padding versus margin? So let's understand that very carefully. You have already seen the box picture, but if that is clear to you, you will never confuse, but let's just understand it once more. So margin is a property used to create space around the element, but outside of any defined border. So the margin is always a space around the element outside the border. Okay, and then you can specify margin top, margin right, margin bottom, margin left, or you can put all of them together in one single margin shortcut or shorthand, similar to border top, border right, border bottom, border left, like that. Okay. But one thing to remember and understand is margin is always outside the border of the element. While this is interesting thing. So when you use margin property and set it to auto, to horizontal, you can use it to set it in the middle of the screen. Okay, when you put margin auto, your element will be placed in the middle of the screen, and it will always be middle of the screen, because what it does, it actually calculates the space around the element. Now it has to be for a width which is less than 100%, of course. So if you have a div, like we have a div right now, and which is suppose we set the width again, fixed width, and I said 300 pixel, right? That's what we started with, or 200. Okay, now here it is not placed somewhere in the middle, and I want it to be placed in the middle. What I will do, instead of putting a fixed value for margin, I can set it to auto, A-U-T-O. Okay, now when I do this, what happens is the margins will be calculated automatically, and whatever is the space left around the element, it will get equally distributed on both side, left and right. And auto is only for horizontal spacing or left and right margin, right? So remember this, auto is only for left and right margin, not for top and bottom margin. So what will happen now? Let's just quickly see. So this element is now placed exactly in the center because the margin is auto. So the overall space left around the border is calculated and divided into two equal values, and that is set automatically as the left margin and right margin. Now let me reduce the screen size, and you will see that the placement of the box is automatically changing, and it is still being maintained exactly in the center. So margin auto can be useful in some situation where we want the box to be placed exactly in the center of the screen horizontally, right? Okay, fine. So this is how we make it appear horizontally center aligned. Okay, the next thing is padding, and you have already observed, but I am repeating again. So padding is a property used to generate space around an element's content. First of all, it's a space created around the element before the border, so it is inside the defined border. So padding is between the content and the border, and margin is between the border and the next element, outside. So remember this. Again, you can put specific margins by margin, specific paddings by saying padding top, right, bottom, left, etc. So box sizing property causes the elements to maintain its width. So this is a special property that we can use. And when we say this box sizing, what happens is width is fixed. Okay. And so anything else that you put up like padding or border or margin, etc., will get accommodated within the given width. Margin is not, of course, so padding and border will get adjusted within the border of the box because margin is always outside the border, so that will not be affected. So I was explaining you earlier when you say whether the width is 300 pixel, if the width is 300 pixel, whether it is the contents width and padding and border are extra. Let's see that. Okay. So let's come back to the example and we do what? We put two elements, one after the other, and both have the same width. Padding is same, right? Content is also same. Margin is auto. It does not matter, but we will see that. And then we say box sizing. Right? That was the property that we were looking at. Box sizing. Fine. Let's go back. And here we say border box. And let's now see what happens for the first box and what happens for the second box. Okay. Now you see. So what is happening? 300 pixel and then you have 50 pixel padding, right? So this is 300 pixel and then you have 50 pixel of padding both side and then you have 15 pixel of border on the other side. So what is happening here? In the first box, 300 pixel is kept for the content itself, right? So this width will be only for the content and padding is beyond that, border is again further beyond that, right? And let me put some exact value for margin too. So let me put it 10 pixel and I will put it the same in the second box also. I just want to see the difference caused by box sizing. Okay. So everything else is same except the box sizing property, and I have it. Now you see, border is created, right? Content is created, but here you see something extra. How is that happening? This is because of 50 plus 50 for padding and 15 plus 15 for border. That is going extra in the first box, right? Margin is still 10px, so that is counted outside. So this width to this width that you see here is actually what? It is 130 pixel. And I can actually calculate that by putting another box here, but I don't want to get into this. So you can imagine that if you have put up box sizing, and that value is set to border box, the size of the border or size of the element is counted including the border. But if you have not put the box sizing value, the size of the element is only for the content and padding and border are extra. So that will make a lot of difference when you are putting contents side by side or one above the other. Okay, so you have to consider this property. All right, so now we have the outline. Sometimes we are putting things, putting a space outside the border. Fine, we are doing that by putting a margin. But beyond margin, if I have to put something beyond margin also, then what? There could be a situation where I want to put something beyond margin too, or beyond the border at least. If I have not put the margin, no problem. But I want to do something outside the border. And for that, the option is outline. So that is always outside the border, of course, and it makes the element stand out. Okay, so let's go back to the image example that we had. This one, right? And let me comment this out, this bottom section for the time being, so that we focus on image. Okay, let me see that example again. This was example 1, right? Okay. So I see this, and here is the image. Fine. Now I have a border, which is a dotted border, but I want to do something outside the border again. All right, so I can do that by using outline. And how? What is the property for that? You see, outline style, outline color, outline width, and then offset, etc. So it is very similar to border. So a border outside the border. So let's use that. Let's use that in this image situation. So what I want to do is I want to say outline. And I say outline, I want to have a 10 pixel outline and solid and of you say blue color. Okay, and let's see what happens now. Right, so now it is giving you an outline, and remember we had created a border radius, so that is why the original space occupied by the image was still a rectangle. However, the appearance was little beveled. Okay, so now the outline is placed outside the border. Fine, outside the border, but it has a problem. The problem with outline is that it may overlap with the other element. So you have to be very careful when you're putting other elements alongside the element having outline. You have to always consider that outline is not respected by the other elements because outline is not part of the box model. So the content of box model is content, padding, border, and margin. Outline is not part of that. So if you have put up an outline and which is significantly thicker, you may see that outlines are overlapping. Even when you had enough margin put up, you will have outlines overlapping. So it is not that used thing, but it still gives you an option to create a border around the border, right? So this is how you can use outline. All right, so we have seen this example, and then you can use outline style, outline color, outline width, everything appropriately. Outline offset is a special property which adds space between the outline and the border. So you can still create more space between the border and the outline. So let's do that. Let's play with it. Right now, the border and outline has no space. So you see this border outline thing and the border, dotted border, are basically touching each other on all sides. I want to create a little extra space in the middle so that it looks much better. So I can do that by specifying outline offset. And I say 2 pixel, a little extra space between the outline and the border. And let's come back and see. Here, it is now not touching. Let's make it a little more so that we have a significant gap. Yep, so it is now better. But you see a problem. The problem is that the outline has less width available on the top and left side. And that is the problem with outline, because the box model does not take the outline in consideration when it is being placed. So if there is a space available, like on the right hand side and the bottom, you have enough space, so that is being considered. And outline is also going to eat inside the width of the outline. So let me put up a little thicker outline again and see if it makes any difference. Now, so outline became thicker, but this edge problem remains. So this is something that can be solved using positions, and we will learn about positions later, but let me give you a little quick view of that. And if I say position, this another style property, and I say relative, and I say top is 30 pixel and left is also 30 pixel. Let's see if it is making any difference. Here you go. So your whole element is now shifted inside the screen by 30 pixel, 30 pixel. And then now you have enough space available for outline. So this is how we can make little adjustments here and there and create space for even the outline. But outline is always optional. So it is not part of box model. So it may seem to be crippled and cropped. Okay. But position can help, because position gives us a way to hook the element at a particular location on the screen, right? I can decide where exactly my element is placed. All right. So outline is a good to use thing, and outline offset gives us extra space between border and outline. So unlike border, the outline is drawn outside the element's border and may overlap with other content. And that is the warning that I was giving you earlier. Also, the outline is not part of the element's dimensions. The element's total width and height is not affected by the width of the outline. So that all we saw right now. Now, let's control the visibility. There will be many situations where visibility of the element needs to be controlled. Sometimes you want it to appear on certain actions. Like say, I say, show me the content, and then it appears. Otherwise, it remains hidden. Or you say, hide this section, hide this part, and then it disappears, right? So there will be many situations where the visibility has to be controlled. Usually, it is driven or triggered by some user actions. And that is where the JavaScript part will come, where we will say, okay, make it appear, make it disappear on certain user actions. So I am responding to user actions. So we'll learn about how to do that conditionally or dynamically later in upcoming sessions when we will talk about JavaScript. But for the time being, let's learn the property which controls the visibility. So there are two properties basically, but before that, let's understand this fact. Every HTML element has a default display value, depending on what type of element it is. The default value could be block or inline. Block is like a rectangular block, and inline is like a linear appearance. It is not placing a next line after the content. You're familiar with many tags which have a block display. All headings, p tag, and now you saw div tag, and even images. Inline elements will not make a break. So you are familiar with elements like span tag and all other text modification tags like b, I, u, delete, insert, etc. All of them are inline display elements. Okay, the primary difference is block will create a rectangle around it and it will force a next line, while inline will not do it. It will let the content remain in the line. And that is quite important for us. So the display is a CSS property which is controlling the display behavior. Sometimes we want to display the content, sometimes we don't. And sometimes something which is by default displayed as a block, I want to display it like inline. And sometimes something is displayed like an inline by default and I want to change it to block. So display is a very important property that we can use to control the display of things. So let me do one quick thing for now. I will uncomment this paragraph and I will come back to the screen and see what is happening. Two things actually. Here you see that this outline has created an overlap with this. And the second thing is that after the image, this is broken down. I mean, image is taking by default display for image is block. So it is occupying a rectangular space, right? We have the image tag, which is a block, and P is also a block. Fine. So now I want to set display property for both. So let us see if I do a display. Let me first remove the outline things because that is creating problem, and I will also remove position because we will learn about that later. I'm removing that so that overlap problem is gone. Yeah, and outline is also gone. I don't need it. All right. So now let's see if I put a display on style, display property. First, let's put it on image and see what happens. So display, and I know it is displayed in certain form. Let me put it a value called inline. So display has a property, display is a property with multiple possible values, and first property that I'm going to use is inline, or the property value is inline. And let's see what happens now. No difference. Can we use indent instead of position? Yeah, indent can be used for text only, but for all other elements you will have to use position. And indent is also indenting the first line only. All other lines will appear from its own position. Okay. All right. So display, changing the display on image has not made a difference because P tag is also a block display, right? So let me remove the display from there and now specify on P and see what happens. Will it make any difference really? Let's see. So now instead of the default display behavior of P, which is block, I am saying inline. Let's see if it makes any difference. What is happening? It is now broken completely. Correct? So this is not good. And let me use another property, inline block. Then what? Yes. So inline as a block. So you are going to be inline, but as a block. You are still a block, but you are placed inline to the earlier element. So that is a right property for P, and that is what we are commonly going to use. So now image and paragraph are placed side by side instead of one after the other in vertical order, right? And that makes a lot of difference. So I can always change the display and make something appear very differently. Now, we have been commenting the elements. We have been commenting out the elements because I didn't want it to appear. Like this one, for the time being when I was dealing with outline, I said, let me comment this out. Okay, so I had commented the whole content. Now, what I can do is I can set display none. When I say none, this particular element will completely disappear. hook. So it is there. It is there. It is a valid content. There is nothing commented out here. But because display is none, the browser is not displaying that element. So display none is quite useful in controlling the visibility, whether it is visible or not. First thing, if you say none, the content or the element will not be displayed. And if you are not happy with its default display of block or inline, you can change that and you can make it appear differently. All right. So let me come back and change this to display block, inline block, and it will appear inline but as a block. Now inside this, I am putting say span around the first element, first line, and span will practically keep the element in line, right? So no break. All right, let me remove this BR, and that will show you that this line and this line are basically appearing in the same, because span will not force a line break. So let's see that. Now there will be two lines put up one after the other. It's a sea beach, kids are playing in the sea. Good. Okay. Now I want this span to appear as a block. Very simple. I can do that by applying a display property or setting a display CSS, and instead of the default inline, I will say block. Okay. And now this particular span will appear like a block, and this one will appear after that. So let's see. Again, so it gives me a behavior as if the span has put up a break after itself. So display is quite a useful property. That is what we are going to use quite often. All right. So for visibility, we can set different values for display and it makes it work. To hide something, we will set display equals to none, right? Display colon none will make the element disappear completely. Okay, so it hides the element. But there is another property which is called visibility. In some browsers, in some pages, you would have seen, or you will see when you get into, you will see another property called visibility. Visibility is only to let you know how it will appear, whether it is this visible or not. Okay, but there is a little difference in the appearance of the content between display and visibility. So when you say visibility hidden versus display none, it makes a little difference. So let me show you by example. So I have this particular span, fine, which I said block. Let me remove this property so that it will appear again, and I shall keep the BR tag intact so that it will still be breaking. Okay. Okay, no problem. It is coming back to original. Now let me put a display property. And here I am saying display none. So what will happen? The first element will disappear. And let me put this BR inside the span tag. Okay. And before that, let me see how it works. So I have put up the entire line inside span so that it is appearing as it is, no difference. Now I am going back and applying the display none. What you will see that this line will completely disappear and everything will be pushed one line up. Let's just quickly see it. Right? Everything has been pushed up and the height of the box has also reduced. If you did not notice that, let me open this in two screens separately, side by side, and then we will see the difference. So once I will remove the style and I will refresh one of the two pages. Okay, so it has the line, fine, and then I bring it back, I make the change, and the second, okay, so now I have two pages side by side. It's one is the older appearance and another is the newer appearance, and you can see the difference. This one is lengthier in height than this, which means this piece is gone, and it is gone completely. However, instead of display none, if I had set visibility, and visibility I set to hidden, what it will do, it will not show the content, fine, but it will keep the space for it. So now I have changed the visibility to hidden, and I come back on both the pages side by side, and this is where the visibility has to be hidden. Now I'm refreshing this page, and you will see something. Now what you see is there is little extra space above this kids, and that space is for this line. So that space is maintained while the content is not displayed. So that's a big difference that appears. If it is not so visible, I will do the same on a thing that is somewhere in the middle, right? So that will be good for us. So let me move this whole span somewhere down. Okay. So, and let me refresh the both pages. Let me refresh both pages. Okay. And what you will see is this. Okay. So there is a space created in the middle. Now we did not create any space, but this is happening because the visibility is set to hidden. If I had set display instead, display to none, there will be no extra space left for the element. Okay, and I can refresh one of the two pages and show you the difference. Yeah, so here there is no extra space because the display is none. So that is a big difference between visibility and display properties treatment, right? And this is important for us to know because sometimes it comes as a choice. If visibility is there, why shouldn't I use that instead of using display? Okay, so it makes a lot of difference in case of visualization. Okay, so one more thing. So display, we used a few values. We tried to use inline. We used block, we already know, and there is an inline block that we used, and we also used none. But there are plenty of other possible values for display, and each of them has certain appearance. One of them that we will be using quite a lot going forward will be flex and sometimes grid also. And there will be various table specific displays. So display is going to be very handy for us in many practical situations. Okay. So that leads to the end of second session as well. So today we learned a very, very important part of HTML. In the first session, we learned about images, how to first embed the image, how to size the image, and how to create borders around the image so that it looks nicer. In the border, we learned about styling of the border, width, color, and radius. All that we learned in the first session. And we also realized that border properties are not just limited to image, but it can be used on other elements as well, like we used it on a p tag. Then we went into the second session and we learned about the box model, because box model gives us a whole lot of option to place the content nicely by allowing spaces around the content, around the border. Okay, so we have padding, which creates a space between the content and the border. Then we have the border and its thickness. And then between the border of two elements, if I have to create a space, I use margin. And instead of margin, if I have to put another border around the border, then the option that I have is outline. So we can use outline to create secondary border, but the problem with outline is that it may overlap with other elements. We can still create a space between the primary border and the outline border by using outline offset property. We also observed a problem with outline where we had the element placed at its default position. The outline was getting non-appearing, right? It was not appearing. The left-hand side outline was not appearing. The top was not appearing or almost thick, very thin. So for that, we used some positioning attributes, and we used position attributes, position relative, and then we said top and left, and then it started appearing. The outline again appeared. And then we went ahead with display, controlling the display behavior. So something is displaying as block by default, we changed it to inline block. Something which is displayed as inline, we changed it to block. And we also controlled the appearance by setting the display to none. We also observed the difference between visibility and display. Right, so we learned a lot of good things today, and these are going to be with us forever. We are going to use all of these concepts every time, almost every time. All right, what we are going to do next tomorrow, we are going to learn about a few other important HTML elements. So far, we have been dealing with text, fine. We have been preparing text or putting text in spans and P and headers, and we have been decorating it using B tag and I tag, U tag, or some other font styling. Perfect. But in some cases, we need to put the content, textual content, or maybe non-textual content also in different formats. Sometimes we want to have a clickable content which will allow you to navigate away from this page to some other page, or from this section of the page to some other section of the page. And that is called links. So we will learn about links tomorrow. The next thing is listing. So sometimes we want to create a list. Now for this example, where we had to list the descriptions or points of a scene. This was a scene, right? The text that you see right now, kids are playing in the sea. Several of them are making sandcastles. These are like points, bulleted points. So I could not create it today. And I had to put up breaks, line breaks purposely to make it appear on different lines. This is a little too clumsy. Can I create a bulleted list of things? Yes, we can. So HTML gives you a way to create listings. And then the most powerful presentation part of HTML is a tabular structure. Table is used quite a lot, and that gives you two-dimensional view of content. And HTML has great features, great elements, and capability to place the content in tabular structure. So we'll learn about these, tomorrow. And once we are going to learn all of these, we are pretty much complete with our minimum knowledge that is required to create a nice web page. So we'll put all of this knowledge into action. But one thing will still remain, and that is color units. So we'll spend some time. We have used color quite a lot in all our all the examples so far, but we will focus into color units, and we'll see what are the other possibilities that we have with colors. We will deal with different unit types and see the effect of them. And that will give us full ammunition to create static web pages. And we will use that knowledge to create web pages tomorrow. Fine? So we will be able to create a fully functional web page tomorrow. And I want you guys to be ready with your example that you want to create. I will take one example, but I'm open to use other examples from you as you suggest, and I will create examples as per your suggestion. Okay, any question before we wrap up today's session? All right, you can keep posting your questions on the group, or you can send me personally, and I will try to answer today itself, or we can discuss those questions tomorrow. All right, thanks for being with me, and I'm going to end the session now. Thank you once again.